Welcome to 3 Point Cyber, a podcast about cybersecurity topics and events for the layperson. The ideas, opinions, and discussions of this podcast are those of the host, co-host, and guest and do not necessarily represent the views of their respective employers or affiliates. Recording and propagation of this podcast is highly encouraged as long as an acknowledgement is given to the ownership. Music and graphics used in the podcast and promotional materials cannot be used in other events not tied to the podcast without the express written consent from Alpha Omega Advisors. Episode 14, 3 Point Cyber. I can't believe we've already got 14, and yet we have so many more to go. Andrew, you there?
I am here.
So how you been doing?
I've been very well, thank you. Actually went to Vienna this past weekend, and it was pretty incredible.
Very nice. Vienna, huh? The whole weekend?
The whole weekend.
How long did that take to get there?
Flying, it was an hour flight from
Yep.
Warsaw to,
cool.
Vienna. And yeah, the history, I'm a big history buff. So got to see a military museum there. And I highly recommend to the audience, if you come to Europe, that be one of the places on your list to go.
Yeah, that sounds like that'd been an incredible weekend. I know when I was over in Belgium a few years ago, I was just amazed at seeing buildings that are older than the United States. 400 and 500-year-old buildings that are still standing, and it's just incredible.
Well, I'll tell you, something else that is incredible is that I'm betting that some of those buildings also may not have been, but looked like they were. I know that, after World War II, they actually took the time and the resources to rebuild a lot of those, that architecture the way it originally had been.
Yeah, that's very true.
That's something that we wouldn't do in the U.S.
Nope, we just tear it down, build it all new again.
Exactly.
It's amazing that, we do have, when you see 100-year-old house around here, it's like, nope, we don't want that anymore. Just tear it down. Let's build a new one. And not very many of them are still standing, except up in the New England area. You can go up there and you can find 150 and 175 maybe even older year-old houses still standing.
Yeah.
And they keep those on the historical marker and they keep them up. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So this episode, Andrew, is going to be a little bit different than what we normally do. We don't have a special guest on today, but this one is being prompted by something that I came across on LinkedIn this week, realizing that it is part of cyber. And hopefully as we go through this discussion, we can educate our listener in what's happening out there and what you can do to prevent falling to victim to this cyber crime. And that has to deal with employment scams. As I mentioned, I was on LinkedIn and I saw this article from this young lady. She decided to post things that had happened to her this past month, and I was just really floored at the detail she put into this discussion of this scam. And it's like, there's a lot of red flags here, and we're going to kind of nitpick this thing apart. Not blaming the victim of this at all for anything, because it is so easy to become a victim to a scam if you're not paying attention to what you're doing. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
So right after this, we'll get started with that. Okay, we're back, and we've got a really interesting episode this time because we're actually gonna go into the anatomy of a scam, talking about what happens and how it transpires and the things to look for if you happen to be a victim of one or in the process of potentially being a victim to one. This is about employment scams, and there are a lot of them out there going on right now. So we're going to talk about that and what you can do to protect yourself if you happen to get one of these going. Andrew, anything you would like to kind of bring up on this one?
Not yet. I'm sure I'll have something incredibly wise to say later on.
I'm sure. I'm very sure. So I sent you the link to this article. This article was a post on LinkedIn from an individual out west. She decided to share her story of how she was scammed over a job offer. I will not call her out by name. I actually will tell you this, that I have invited her onto a podcast. I have not heard back from her, but I think it would be an excellent opportunity if she's going to be willing to want to further this exploit and let other people know. I'm hoping that she does reply to me, because I think it'd be a good podcast to have her on. But anyway, she went into quite detail on her post. She did a very good job at outlining exactly what happened to her, and it appears by this write-up that this all took place in a 10 to 14-day period. So it's not something that happens quickly, and that's something I also want to get into too. These types of scams just don't occur, within the hour or within the day. These things are going on for a while, because part of it is the idea that the scammers or the threat actors want to build a trust with you. And once they think they've got that trust established, that's when the scam starts to occur. So, and even before then, even before they make contact with you, they are already doing reconnaissance and setting their whole scam up long before they ever make contact with their intended target. And that's what we do in cyber. That's what we look for and help expose in the cyber field. There's some very good, what we call social engineers out there. They can go through and pull profiles of their potential target victims and get all kinds of information from them, including what they're trying to sell you or do with their scam. They're going to have all that information as well. So some of them can be very elaborate, Andrew, and it's like they can make this thing appear so legitimate that it's very difficult to say whether you are being scammed or not.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, in particular, this individual, where they're at in life. Well, how am I trying to say this? Yeah, so I think a lot of people just they don't think they're going to be scammed because they don't think they have something that scammers want.
Well, it's not only that, but I think it's the human pride issue. I think most victims don't ever think it's going to happen to them anyway, and it's probably because what you just mentioned. They either don't have something to offer, or they think they're too intelligent to be scammed, and I think that happens quite a bit too. They don't want to admit that they've been scammed.
Well, absolutely both. There is the human pride that, and you have to say that, congratulate this person for helping to educate and by everyone else through her experience.
Absolutely.
But a lot of people, won't report these things if they've been duped. But I do think another point is that, so she was coming out of her studies. She was graduating or had graduated.
Yeah, so a little bit of background about this person. She is in college and she's working on a master's degree at the moment. So she's actually, her profile says she's an MBA candidate, and she is in IT world. She's in design world. Actually, she's listed as a UX UI designer. For those that may not know what a UX UI designer, that's typically, it stands for user experience, user interface. That's the design person that when you're looking at something on your computer or that way an application is displayed, you pull up your smartphone and you're looking at applications and game stuff there. That's called the user experience, user interface. And there's designers that just lay that out for how to interact with the users of a product. So that's what she's into. And that's kind of what they this scammer kind of went off on as well. Because here, let's just go ahead and start into this scam. She said she received an email invitation to interview for a remote product design manager position, which that follows right in line with what she does. So that's a first, hey, I got you type of thing. If you're looking for a job, which most college students are, they're looking for that opportunity. So this particular one was a position at Splunk. That's spelled SPLUNK for those not in the IT world. They are a very well-known and very large company that does a lot of work in computer software, and specifically they have some cybersecurity products. So they're very well-known in the IT world. Very, very good company, very big company. And she received that email from an email that she said came from info@splunkcareers.us. And it came to her university email address. And basically, she said in it, stated that she was being fast-tracked to an interview because they've already done some profile lookups on her. They like what she's done. Her experience would be a good fit. And I'm going to throw this in here because if you do some background check on her anyway, just using her LinkedIn, she has a website where she posts all of her work, which you're seeing that a lot. People will put their own websites up and show what they can do and what they're wanting to do. And that's where they went. They saw exactly what and that's why it sounds legit that we've already reviewed you. We like what you do. And therefore, we want to fast track you on a good interview process because we may think you'd be a good fit for our company. So what happened was she actually scheduled an interview with what she says is they gave the name of a person that actually is a Splunk name, okay? And she even went as far as to look up the profile of that person to make sure that who she was talking to was a real person at the company they were offering, and found that the person really was. So they set up a Skype chat interview, and then she was told that, following, so evidently this was on a day, evidently on a Thursday or a Friday of the week. It looks like it was on a Friday of a week. And then she was told after that Skype chat interview that be ready to, be online Monday for updates. So, there's another thing right there that kind of, a lot of people don't think about in scams, because they're intending on thinking scams, Andrew, is like happening right now. But this one, she had time to think about this through the entire weekend. I mean, you could tell that they're not pushing this to throw alarm bells up really quick, right?
Right.
So they let her set all weekend, and then on Monday, she actually went back online to check for updates, and she received an offer. And the request to fill out an employment contract, authorized to get a background check done, got a direct deposit form for her salary, and a copy. And of course, when you do that, companies, this is legit, a lot of companies do this, they'll ask for a copy of your driver's license for employment verification purposes. So later that week, she went on, as she says, she had a chat with the alleged CIO of Splunk, and they gave the right name for that. And she said she was briefed on the equipment that she would be using for her home office. She was told she would be given company funds to purchase an iPhone and other products. Then the finance department would send her account information to make a purchase for these items. However, in the link that was sent, she was instructed to link the company account to her credit card to pay off a current balance before she makes any purchases. Now, I'm not sure why they would want to do that. Evidently, really just to kind of get that link between the company bank and her card, which is part of this scam. But up until this point, that would be probably the first red flag that says, if you're going under employment, number one, they're not going to have you linking personal credit cards to anything that they do. The company doesn't need to do that. And then obviously it keeps going on. And she said that she received all the information regarding the bank account from the company to successfully link to her credit card, which she did. She used the account to pay off an outstanding balance, as she was told to do, and then went to the Apple store to purchase items. Again, this is all going on her credit card. So she's purchasing all of these items. And then here's, to me, red flag number 2. There's a lot more red flags, but I'm going to pull out the most obvious ones right at the moment. And then we'll go back and try to decipher what should have been done at the very onset of the first email. She was then instructed to send those items she just purchased at the Apple store to the company, so they could get company branding, get the most updated software put on it, and then they would send it. They used for security purposes. They used that whole mantra that they needed to do to her equipment before she started work, and then they would deliver that back to her. Well, at that point, I think she started feeling a little bit uneasy about things. And so she called a friend and some families to confirm her through this suspicion. And then one of her friends rightfully suggested that she reach out to the HR department at Splunk and ask, am I being considered for a job or whatever? And that's what she did. And that was when she said that the actual HR Splunk employee confirmed her suspicion. So she then immediately canceled her UPS shipment, which that means she actually did carry through all of this. She was in the process of shipping this stuff, which is, kind of amazing. But, Andrew, I guess at this point, here's where I would say, as I read through comments, there's a lot of people on there that just went off on her of so many red flags. Why did you do this? But, to the point here, this is why they're called scams. You're talking about a young individual here that doesn't have a lot of experience in handling this type of a situation. So the better off the scam is, the more complete the scam is, the harder it is to detect something. The second part about that, Andrew, is that you've got you're dealing with emotions at this point. You know, she's been looking for a job, right? And now she's been offered a job, and she's on cloud nine and not thinking of this potentially being something to be scamming. You and I have talked about this in the past, that human nature sometimes is we'll lean on the side of error instead of side of caution when it seems to be a benefit to us, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think that's what's going on here. Actually, Andrew, you know, we've had some podcasts about social engineering and some great ideas and great points in our social engineering. We'll go right to this point, and then we'll go back in and kind of take this whole thing apart. But the thing that I want to point out right now is when it's a scam, there's three things that you really need. These are 3 points that we pull out of our podcast. The first one is, when in a scam, is you need to ask yourself, is there any urgency to this contact that this outside person has made? And in this case, there really wasn't a big urgency because they were carrying this out through a few days. Okay, so even though that's one you need to ask yourself on any email stuff, is there an urgency to this? Because if there is, that's a big red flag, something's wrong. And then the second thing is, does it play on your emotions? And obviously this one does, but I can see where she wouldn't see that as playing on her emotions, because so far she's been offered a job. Anybody that's offered a job is pretty much on cloud nine. I mean, they're not thinking that's an emotional thing, but it really is an emotional thing. So that's my second thing about this one. And the third thing about a scam is, if there's any money involved in the whole ordeal, the whole thing that you're working with, whatever the situation is, that's probably your largest flag you're going to have. Scams is all about money, and the scammers making money off of you. And a lot of times you have to remember that it's not just immediate money, but it's getting your information, your credit card information, your bank information, your personal your PI, what we call PII, personally identifiable information, where they can potentially go out and open up accounts in your name and then start defrauding you that way. So if there's any money tied to any of these, that's the biggest red flag to any scam that's out there. Andrew, have I missed any points that I know we've heard in the past?
Even though there was no urgency in this, it seems that you can probably replace urgency with how do I want to say this? There's a different aspect, but probably going into this, I could probably take that place, and that's her perceived difference in who she was dealing with and where she was coming from. You know, when you're a graduate and you've got this major company that's offered you a job, and you're talking to employees of this company, you know, you don't want to look like you're stupid.
Right.
You know, so you don't want to ask those questions if they're acting, oh, well, this is just the way it's done. You know, you feel like the new person. So I think you probably replace urgency with just the perceived discrepancy of the position she felt she was in. Yeah.
And again, we can sit back and Monday morning quarterback this thing all day long and pick it apart and say, man, you shouldn't have done this and you shouldn't have done that. But that's not fair to the victim. What we're trying to do is get the point out here of, you need to be aware of your own situation and question things that are coming in. And that's where we want to get, our users to be able to identify a scam that may be being attempted on you. And that's kind of where we want to go with this. That's why we want to try to take down or take apart this whole scam and give you areas of insertion that you need to do to determine whether or not that email that has come in for you is a scam or not. And that's kind of that's the whole purpose here.
Oh, well, yeah. And the internet is a place full of a lot of opinions. And, when you talk about blaming the victim, the internet is a place of conversation and different opinions. And regardless of what you call it, you still have to take lessons from screw ups. And I'm pretty sure that she's never going to do this again.
Oh, I'm sure she's definitely learned. Learned a lesson. So the point is, how can we take that lesson and learn the lesson without it ever occurring to ourselves? And that's one of the hardest things in life there is to do, is you can take experiences from other people, but a lot of times you don't learn until you experience it yourself. I mean, that's just the way life is. But you're right. There's a lot of opinions out there, and I'm not going to tell you that I'm going to have every single answer for a scam identification, but I've seen enough and know enough that if you follow some of these basic rules, you can get these scams identified, even down to what should you do if you've fallen victim to one of these things. And that's a key part too, that if you have fallen victim, there's some things you definitely need to go and do. And we'll cover those again here in just a few minutes as well.
I'll add this. In my line of work, I have been contacted by phone several times with the person on the other end talking about things that, so they wanted information from me, and was talking business type stuff. And my rule is that if I don't literally know the person on the other end of that phone, then I tell them, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are. I can't talk about this. And then I redirect them, to someone else, regardless of how knowledgeable they are, how official they sound, because you don't know. And that's until you absolutely verify who the person is on the other end.
Absolutely. And sometimes, Andrew, even when if you take a phone call like that, sometimes just by delaying them a little bit or changing the topic, you can learn real quick whether or not they may be legitimate, because a lot of the people that are on the other end of that phone will be very impatient with you if you're not doing what they're asking you to do. And that's the first sign of unprofessionalism. And man, you need to run away from those people really, really quick. And that the easiest thing to do at that point is just hang up the phone.
Yeah.
So let's go back now and kind of start from the top. Of what do you do? You get an email here that's really grabbed your attention, and you're being invited to potentially interview for a position that you really would like to have. Again, keeping in mind the solicitation that's going on with this person it's her field. She's in school. She's probably looking for a job. In fact, I can say without a doubt she is looking for a job, because I went to her website and right on there she's posting, here's what I'm looking for. So there you go. Now, that's the first thing. They know she's looking for a job. So as I was kind of laying this thing out and how to tear it apart for our listeners, you got to remember that this scam started long before they ever contacted her. They had to do reconnaissance on her, and they had to do reconnaissance on basically setting up all the Splunk information, which means that they went out and did what we call a recon of Splunk. So they knew who the CTO was. Easy information you can get. You can get that off of a Google search or going on LinkedIn and start looking for Splunk employees. And then the second thing is they start setting up spam email capabilities where it's going to look like it's coming from those individuals. In this case, this email came from from info@splunkcareers.us. It sounds like a great little domain, but I can tell you the very first thing I did when I saw that was I went out on the internet to verify whether splunkcareers.us was a valid domain name. And there's places on the internet in fact, the easiest thing, if you ever want to question whether a domain is legitimate or not, take that domain, go to Google, and then type in who is space, put the domain name in, and then you can it'll give you a return on what that domain is. And in this case, splunkcareers.us isn't even a registered domain. It's not valid. So that tells me right off the bat that's not a valid email address. Okay, so that's the first thing that you can do to look at these emails that are coming in. The email address itself, Andrew, you can actually take that email address and you can go online and search for email verification sites. And you can take an email address and put it in there just to see if it's a valid email. Now, this does not tell you whether, basically what it's doing is a domain check as well. So if I took this info@splunkcareers.us and put it in a search, it came back and said it's a bad email address. So right there is my whole reason for, okay, stop, it's fake, and no further. But if you don't know to do these things, then you're going to continue off on the next items.
Yeah.
But again, if you do get a valid one, let's say, if they would have spammed this person and used a valid email address like info@splunk.com, because splunk.com is a valid domain, chances are that info@splunk.com would have returned everything's good, and you can look and see, and this is what I advise a lot of people to do, check to see how long that domain has been out there. And in the Splunk one, Splunk.com has been out there for either 26 or 28 years, because it's tied to a valid company. But if you would have taken this splunkcareers.us and it would have actually been a valid domain, you can find out when it was actually registered. And almost all scams that appear, these domains have been registered within the year, or usually maximum at 2 of when the scam will take place. So, in other words, it's going to tell you, okay, splunkcareers.us is valid, but it was registered, last year. Well, a company that's well established, it's probably not going to be using that domain to do what they're doing with it.
Yeah. Let me ask you, so you said the end of it was .us and not .com.
That's correct.
Would that have caused you to also or is that?
It would have a few years ago, but not anymore. That's a pretty common one. Those are now that's called the extension of a domain name, and now the domain authority that issues these top level domains have created new extensions, and a lot of them are now the country. You got US for the United States, CA for Canada, things like that. So those are all valid now. And you're starting to see more of them because, quite frankly, we're kind of running out of names to put into the .coms and .net. But you can still spoof all of this stuff. And what I mean by spoofing is I can set up a legitimate email address and send it to you where you think it's coming from this one. But if you know enough and to dig into your emails, you can look at what's called the headers of an email, and it'll actually tell you where it really came from. And that's not necessarily always the same thing as what the from is or the reply to address is. All those are a little bit different. So that is another way, but that's a little more technical in getting into it, and we can't really get into it on a podcast without actually showing someone how to look for something. So anyway, again, that's the first thing, is verify that email. Make sure it's who it's coming from. So that'd be the second thing that she should have done, or anyone is getting this should do, and that's go back and actually go to Splunk, do the search, find out what the real Splunk website is, and because she did look up who the HR person was. But what I'm recommending is you go to the Splunk website first thing, go in and look in the career area and see if that job's even being posted. If the job's not being posted, then that ought to give you an indication that something may not be correct. So the second thing I would do with that would be to go to the contact area of the website, the legitimate website, and see if there is a phone number to call their HR department or a help desk line and ask, and go directly to the company and ask, is this a legitimate offer for an open position? And if it is, who do I talk to about this? And then that's the very first thing. So in all employment scam cases, that's probably the number one thing I would do, would be go right to the company to find out if this is a legitimate opening and if someone at the company has already attempted to reach out to me. That's going to cover 99% of your employment scams.
Yeah. As I was thinking about this, again, going back to her being in grad school, I think it would be helpful if universities would assist more with these types situation.
I think we've had that discussion on a couple other podcasts as well. That's an area where I feel like our universities are not doing a good enough job inside some of their curriculum.
Yeah.
So, we talked about verifying the domain name of the email that's coming in. If it's an unsolicited email, if you're being the one contacted immediately, and you don't know where it's coming from, do everything you can to validate that before you even reply to them. That's one of the first things that they look for. A lot of the spammers that do this kind of work turn their spam into scams by reaching out first, and if you reply, then they know they've got someone on the other end, and they're going to do everything they can to get you hooked into their scam. So unsolicited, cold ones coming in, be very wary. It's just unfortunate the world we live in, but you've got to be that way.
Yeah. And I think something else to look for after what you just described, or this, just reading through the email itself, it may be the first thing actually, but it's the content of the email itself. Are there issues with grammar or capitalization?
Yep.
Does it look professional? Things like that.
It's little things like that. Yes, you would expect some professionalism in the communications. If the grammar's wrong, then it's probably wrong. And they're the thing too that's coming along. I think we're going to see these types of scams get even more sophisticated. And we brought this up on another podcast too. And that's the deep fake industry that's occurring. And what I mean by deep fake, you can go out there and look up, just Google deep fake, and you'll get a big idea of what deep fakes are all about. There's deep fakes in audio and there's deep fakes in video. And I've already heard that there's been attempts to use deepfake videos in interviews where you're looking at someone on your screen. It's not really them, but it's the person that they say they claim to be. There's things to even avoid doing that. If you ever feel like you're on a screen with someone, you don't know who it is, and this is the first time you've been with them, you've done your due diligence, and you've looked up their photograph on the web, and it looks like them, but there's something not quite right, Those could be a deepfake video that's occurring, and because technology is not quite to do live deepfaking, most of the deepfakes are still recorded, and they have to do a lot of processing to make them look fake. A live deepfake attempt, there's a lot of things you can do to catch that. And it's as simple as, if that person is looking straight on and not moving, simply ask them, hey, can you look to your right or to your left? Sounds like a strange question, but if you do that, you're going to throw off the algorithms that are going to try to make that a deepfake, and you can watch that. Literally, your screen will change, and that's a real good indication. If that's the case, immediately get off that call.
Unless it's actually Jim Carrey on the other end of that, who can make his face into whatever he wants.
Yeah, that's.
Then you've got a real problem.
Yeah, I'm not sure Jim Carrey would be out doing deepfakes though. So. Or trying to scam anyone, but you never know. Maybe he's practicing for his next movie or something. I don't know. So yeah, so we brought up how to look for domains. Go Google the domains. Go directly to the company websites. Do everything you can to validate what you're getting into. But again, I can't stress this enough. If there's money involved, that's your largest flag you're going to get as a potential scam. And you need to be doing everything to validate the communications and who's on the other end of this. Now, what are you going to do if you've gone through all of this and you've been scammed and now you've figured out it's a scam? What's your next step? Well, honestly, the very first thing that you need to be doing is you need to be contacting the authorities, because this is a crime and it has been perpetrated on you. What I would highly suggest should be done is you need to contact the FTC. They do have a website at ftc.gov. And
that is the Federal Trade Commission.
Mm-hmm. The FTC is one that you can look up. The FBI recommends going to the www.ic3.gov, which is the Internet Crime Complaint Center. That's where all internet crimes should be reported to. So I would highly recommend that you go to ic3.gov and make that complaint report. If there has actually been money involved in the scam, get a hold of your local authorities and let them at least get a case opened up, because that's a lot of times that's what the FBI will come back with. If they decide they need to investigate, they'll ask if you filed with your local authorities. So there's some kind of a case that's already been started. That's by experience. I've seen that happen before. So if you have been, I would also suggest contacting the website where you may have found the job posting and found out it's a scam. Let them know that is a scam, or you have reasonable suspicion that it is. You probably should even go and talk to the actual company. In this case, she already contacted Splunk, but Splunk needs to know that they're being targeted as well, because that is a target of Splunk, and they're using their name, and sometimes there's things that they can actually go out and do. Contact your financial institution immediately if you've already been scammed and your money's already been taken. You need to let them know. You also need to immediately go out to your credit bureaus and put a freeze on your account, because if they've got your personal information and they've got credit card information, that's what they're going to use to open up other accounts in your name, and then you're going to be stuck with that mess. Let's see. So let's go over some of the other quick tips. I think we've already talked about, searching the hiring company and the company you're working with, doing that on. Now, I think one of the things that we probably need to kind of quickly say, if you're in a hiring situation, there are certain things that companies are going to ask you for. And I went through this when I was with my latest company. They did ask for my driver's license. They needed that for employment verification purposes. They did not ask me for any of my personal credit card information. That's just a big no-no. And I would have stopped that even knowing the company would have been legitimate. I say, no, you don't need my personal credit card for anything. And no, I'm not going to go out and I'm not going to buy equipment on my dime for work here. You need to purchase this for me and have it shipped to me instead of the other way around. That's just a big flag. Be very leery of wire transfers. They're kind of the hardest ones to get reversed once they've occurred. See, don't provide bank account information. That's a tough one. I would never give my bank account information to my potential employee until I have actually confirmed that it is who they say they are. And even then, I'm very cautious about how I give that to them. So be very leery when they're asking even for that. Your social security number is the same way. Now, I know they need that a lot of times when they're doing employment verifications. But you know what? Employment verifications are usually not done prior to an offer. They're done after the offer and you've accepted the offer. So that would be another thing. Don't let them tell you they need to do employment verification on you before they're willing to make an offer to you. That's just not the proper way to get this done. Oh, I do want to bring up, Andrew, that, I went out quickly and I looked at the Better Business Bureau to see what kind of, how is this impacting everyone? And on the Better Business Bureau site, it's the bbb.org website, you can look up scam track. There's a scam tracker up there. And what I did was I went, just the scam type was employment scams. And I went from January 1st to August 18th of this year, just the first 8 months of this year. And the BBB, the Better Business Bureau, has already logged 1,527 scam complaints, just in employment scams. That's not everything else. I'm afraid to even put this thing on to see what other scams are going on. But the regions that are the highest hit right now is right up the East Coast. Chicago's high. Ohio's high, Virginia, North Carolina, the Southeast is really high, Georgia, Florida area, and then the New York area are high in these scams. Actually, as I'm sitting here reading this, it just updated. It's now 1,679 scams. So, it's rapidly going up. It appears that a lot of these scams are coming from fake healthcare organizations, because that's one of the areas that that's where people are being hired from, and that's in healthcare. The one I'm looking at right now is from, the business name used is called Aware Healthcare. That's one. Let's see. What's the next one down on the list? And these are just a couple of days old. Here's a transit logistics service that's out there being used as potential employment scams. Another one called SCA Healthcare. This person that we described this one actually lost $10,000 in this employment scam. And as I was reading through that one, there's so many red flags that if he would have known what to have done, he would have avoided the whole thing. So, Andrew, I think that's about all I've got here. I think we've covered about everything. So what we need to do is kind of come up with our 3 points on this that we really want people to take away. Okay, well, we're back for our 3-point segment here. And this is where we take 3 points out of the discussions we just had. And this episode is all about employment scams that seemingly are running very rampant out there right now. And we in this episode, to get you to understand what to look for in case you might fall victim to one of these, or potentially be a victim to one of these. What do you need to look for? Andrew, there was something you were saying you wanted to kind of follow back up on.
Yeah, and I think this is probably point number one for takeaways, is that anyone is liable to be scammed. This whole scenario seemed like an Ocean's 11 type scam, and it was perpetrated on a college grad student. Mm-hmm. So the point is that these people, these scammers, will go to these kind of lengths, for someone who may not be of great means. Yeah. So you're not, your lack of apparent means does not keep you safe.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Andrew. They look for the most vulnerable, and quite frankly, the most vulnerable are very young, the teenagers that are entering the workforce. They're just going to school because, quite frankly, they don't have a lot of experience in things like this. And then the next susceptible population are the aged, the senior citizens, because they're past, they're before this technology boom. So a lot of this they don't understand. They're not tech savvy anyway. So, when you get an older person that has finally got into the tech world, it's easy to get them involved in scams. So those are the two populations that are really susceptible to this stuff. And I like your point. There's nobody immune to a scam. I don't care how intelligent you are, it is possible that you can get scammed. You can reduce that possibility by learning a few things and tips and tricks and what to look for, but just don't ever think that you can't get scammed, because I can point you in the direction of so many people that is exactly what their thinking was, and it happened.
Yeah. And for our baby boomer population out there, do not click on the Publishers Clearinghouse link. It is a scam.
That's funny. So that would be point number one. Point number two, I'm these last 2 points, Andrew, I'm kind of going to go back to they've been brought out before because they're just so important, and we brought them up at the beginning of this episode. I'm going to wrap 2 of them together into one, and that's is the emails or the contact with you, is it of urgent nature, and is it playing on your emotions? And I think that is just so key to these scams, because if they're giving an urgency to you to act, there's just something wrong. You should never have to be placed in a position to make a decision right now.
Yeah, and the number 3, does it involve money?
Exactly. That's exactly number 3. If it's involving money, there you go. Probably should be number 1. In fact, that probably should be number 2 and 3. And that one is all 3 points made. If you're getting solicited for anything that involves money, chances are there's something really wrong behind it. So that's it, Andrew. I hope that this was beneficial to our listeners. It's out there. There's a lot of scams going on, and we may end up having another podcast of other types of scams coming up soon. Andrew, any final thoughts?
No, what's that movie? Catch Me If You Can.
Yeah.
We need to find a scammer, who's been caught that will come on here and.
That might be difficult to do.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, well, Andrew, as always, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to 3 Point Cyber, a production from Alpha Omega Advisors. If you have questions about this episode or have a topic for discussion or a guest you would like us to have on, please email us at 3pointcyber@gmail.com. That's 3, the number 3, point, P-O-I-N-T, cyber, C-Y-B-E-R, all one word, 3pointcyber@gmail.com. We encourage you to share this podcast with others. This podcast is owned and produced by Alpha Omega Advisors. The theme song was created by music producer Andrew Van Wert in Nashville, Tennessee. This is Dave Summit, and until next time, keep on learning.